getting outside your comfort zone. I know a lot of people want to stay in the bubble that they're in, but understanding the people outside of just your circle and reaching out and going to different groups. So whatever that might be, an art group or a science group, and, not just always taking class with all your buddies, because that forces you to really have to get to know someone else and say, hey, I get to know you, Nick, on a personal level. What are you into? Yeah, you might like hockey, but you might also be really into snowboarding, and why you got into it and why you might be so great at it, and why I would love to learn that. That's kind of the things that I picked up on later in life. I picked it up probably in my junior career, but that's really where I would say, get out of your comfort zone and push yourself all the time, because it's only going to make things easier as you get older and older and you do other things in life.
Welcome to Tad Voices. I'm Nick.
And I'm Lawson. And we're friends and former teammates who are here to talk about mental health.
We are by no means experts in this field, nor is this a substitute for professional help, but we can promise open and vulnerable conversations that highlight the strength of some amazing people who have decided to share their story with us.
Talk, share, help. And thanks for listening.
We now welcome to the podcast a native of North Carolina and a product of Shattuck St. Mary's in Minnesota, Kenny Gillespie. Kenny attended RPI in Troy, New York, where he competed on the men's ice hockey team and studied business management. He is now currently settling into life in sunny Raleigh, North Carolina, working for Oracle. Welcome to the podcast, Kenny Gillespie.
Thanks, Nick. I appreciate it and excited to be on.
Kenny, thanks so much for joining us. Like Nick said, how are you doing personally? What have you been up to lately?
Doing great. I've had a major move recently coming out of the Boston area. I think COVID is really was an eye-opener for me, being away from family. I made the move, decided to come back and buy a home back in the Raleigh area, just be closer to family and just, spend time. I've been away from everyone for so long, probably since I was like 13. So it's nice to be back and, getting back into the area and coaching hockey here in North Carolina.
That's awesome to hear. And, sort of without further ado, we'd love to open the floor for yourself to sort of take us through your, your mental health journey and sort of where it's led you to now.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, I was born in Sunnyvale, California, moved to North Carolina when I was about 7 years old. That's really when I started getting into the hockey journey. Neither of my parents ever played. My dad was a football player and my mom was a figure skater / dancer. Picked it up playing roller hockey back when I was about 8. And, most people that I know start hockey at a way, way younger age. And I was kind of a little bit behind just due to the climate of the area that I grew up in. And picked it up and just became kind of a natural. And I kind of took off, and I had an aunt that kind of pursued me into always following my dreams and allowed me to kind of get started. And she said, if you're going to take this anywhere, you're going to need to convert from roller hockey to ice hockey. And she decked me out on equipment and got me going. And I never looked back after that. Made my first AA team here in North Carolina. I never played AAA. And over the summer, I started playing for East Coast Selects, which is a high-end travel team only in the spring and summer. And they kind of springboarded me to begin playing hockey somewhere else. And that somewhere else was Shattuck St. Mary's, where I got to go up against some of the best kids in the world. And I was just this little kid from North Carolina, just trying to find my way and somehow trying to figure out how I'm even on some of these kids' levels. And that's really where I started to find my mental health. And being a kid so far from home, you look at it as like, I'm just a kid enjoying a vacation, but you realize that you're so far away and having to grow up at a very, very young age, because my parents were a 2.5 hour flight away. And if they wanted to drive, it's an 18-hour drive. So there's no quick rush to get to me. And I'm now having to try and compete against some of the best kids in the world for, a spot to play hockey. And, that's really where my mental toughness started to become. And, when I would go back to the dorm and I'd have long nights and understand like why I even was a good player, and why sometimes I even look back and was like, I don't know how I got through it. And I never really saw or talked to anyone that was like me. And when I say like me, I mean, there's not a lot of people that are playing hockey who are African American. So that was a mental struggle in itself of saying, okay, well, how do I deal with being in a sport that's, dominated by, white background, if you want to say. That was a mental toughness in itself, where a lot of people don't want to talk about it. It's being talked about more now, but it was very, very hard mentally to, suck it up, and I can't complain because everyone else is doing the same thing.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point you make. I just want to go back a little bit earlier to what you were saying, and it kind of leads right into my next question. But just at such a young age, like being away from family, being away from some of your closest friends from when you were growing up, kind of maybe take me through how ways that your support system was still there for you, whether or not it be an 18-hour drive away, or were there any other people you looked to specifically to kind of get you through some of those challenges that you were having?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I had a close friend circle back home. Everyone that knows me that knows that I always had friends that I had for life, even to this day, and they supported me. They knew when I was training that, hey, Kenny can't hang out tonight, or he come hang out and he's leaving because his goal is to become this hockey player, and they supported me. Anybody else that wasn't looking at me like that and couldn't envision why I was doing it, I cut them out of my life. And that's a tough thing to tell a kid, no matter the age, because they look at it as like, you never know where you could be. I knew where I wanted to take hockey, and I knew that the friends that weren't trying to do something similar to me or had goals and aspirations, I didn't want it in my life, because I felt like it was just going to be a weight in my life. And then I always had a really close family. I'm an only child, so I was close to my mom, close to my dad, and my dad actually made a big sacrifice in his life to move up to Minnesota halfway through my sophomore year at Shattuck, so I could live off campus, and really gave me that additional support of a parent during that time, because he was seeing that I needed that not only as a person, but in my hockey aspect of my life. And that really pushed me to go even harder in that arena.
Yeah, and I it's sort of a common, thing that I'm hearing is sort of the feeling of loneliness a little bit, both geographically, but also in an environment where you're unlike the majority. And sort of, could you take us through, sort of that feeling, and maybe, things that you did that, sort of piled on, and maybe some things that you wish you had done in those moments to help, sort of alleviate some of that mental burden that you were feeling in those moments?
Yeah, I mean, in that aspect, when you're at Shattuck, I mean, everyone is trying to be the best. And I realized that. I think some of the things that I wish I would have done that I know now is reaching out further and further. When I got to college, I always hung out with more and more people outside of just the hockey team. When I was at Shattuck, I would say I thought that jock mentality, not that it's a bad thing, but I wanted to be around strictly hockey guys or hockey girls all the time. And I just wanted to feed off of that all the time. Now I'm a lot more open and saying, what can I learn from other people? Because there's so many things that they could teach me that I don't know about myself and the way they go about life. That's something that I wish I knew then, because I think it would have brought a lot more opportunities and a lot more friendships that I could look back on. Not that I don't have a lot of great friends from Shattuck in my time. I graduated with a class of 90 people, so you're going to know everyone. You're going to know what they did, and kind of about their family by the time you leave there, and you're always going to have a special place with those people that you graduated with.
And sometimes, it's easier said than done, right? Expanding outside of those who are like-minded and trying to achieve the same goal. But I think a lot of the times, if you allow yourself to do that, like you said, to your point, you're able to learn from others. And I think that can be a valuable experience just in itself. And kind of going back to your comment, you mentioned that your dad had moved closer to you and I think this might be helpful for maybe some of our listeners right now who could potentially be going through their own challenges. But can you remember a specific instance where you were able to finally open up with your dad, and kind of like how that process looked for you, or if it's obviously a difficult conversation to bring up for the first time, and maybe if you had any advice for somebody who was going through something similar and was just looking for somewhere to turn, whether it be a family member, a parent, friend, anything like that.
Yeah, I think I've had a few times, but I would probably say when I got hurt my rookie year in the USHL in Omaha, I was a rookie. I just came off of winning a national championship with Shattuck and Ben Greiner, and we had a fantastic year. And, we coming off that high that, you're on top of the world. You feel like, you're some of the best players in the world going into juniors. And I ended up getting hurt, and this was my biggest injury to date. I ended up having a slight tear in my shoulder, and I'm all the way out in Omaha, Nebraska. I don't expect my parents to come out there. This was a huge setback, not only in my career, but my mental toughness. I had looked back. Was already struggling to get in the lineup, and when I got in the lineup, I got hurt, and I was about to be out for quite some time. And I called my dad, and I was like, I don't think I can do this. I think that I'm going to have to give it up. I was committed to UMass Amherst at the time, and I looked at him, and I was like, I'm ready to pack my bags and come home. I don't think I'm ready for juniors. You kind of had heard about most people that, tell you about juniors, they have good or bad stories, but this was, definitely going to be a downfall, I thought, in my career.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point where, you have these moments where everything feels very definite, right? And so could you take us through that conversation after where, because obviously you pushed through, played 3 years in the USHL, correct? Found a home at RPI. Could you sort of take us through like this moment of like, shit, like this sucks. Like, I don't know if I'm cut out for this. And then obviously you found a way through. So could you take us through those events?
Yeah, definitely. So I ended up sticking out that and grinding out, came back later in the season, ended up playing a second year, was an assistant captain. That was kind of the push of my father saying, hey, like, dig down deep. There's a reason why you're on this journey. It's going to teach you about yourself. And actually ended up, I had a huge coaching change at UMass Amherst. The head coach ended up retiring, and the two other coaches ended up leaving because they didn't get the job at UMass. And that's when I had probably the biggest roadblock in my career is I got decommitted from college. And it's hard to get a scholarship, first and foremost, to any Division I program or Division III program, especially in hockey, because there's not a lot of positions and there's constant players growing and coming into the system. I called my dad, and I remember the coach calling me and saying, hey, like, we're going to push you out a third year. And I called my dad, and I was like, there's no way I can play another year at juniors. It's just, I cannot physically do it. It's a grind to play in the middle of nowhere or, some city where you're, playing in front of great fans, don't get me wrong, but you're just not around family all the time and you're traveling on the bus. He said, there's a reason why, and I ended up playing a third year, and I ended up recommitting to RPI, and I look back at it now, and it was the best decision that could have ever happened in my life, because it's prepared me more for what I do day to day than hockey will ever prepare me for. Not that I haven't had a great career, but now what I do, and to be able to share this story back with kids that there's no guarantee in what you do today in hockey, so always be thinking about that next chapter.
Yeah, that's a good piece of advice for youth. And it's funny. I'm sure I probably actually would have watched you a couple of times. I'm right across the border from Clarkson. So yeah, I can remember going to a few. And I know the years that you were there, like 14, 15. So I can probably, probably watch you play back in the day. But were there just kind of maybe, honing in on RPI specifically and maybe even dating back further to that at Shattuck, were there any mental health services that you sought out, or did counseling or therapy fit into your process at all?
Yeah, so I had some back at Shattuck. they all have their health center, and, there's different people that you might go to. And I'd probably say one of those people was our head coach, Tom Ward. And if you ever got to play for him on the boys prep team, everyone will tell you he's like a father to you. And he treats everyone as their own and not as a hockey player. And he really helped me become bigger than life and really come out of my shadow, I like to say, and, not just be a person that's known for what he does on ice, but to be a voice and be a leader in the school, because there's people that look up to you, whether you know it or not, whether it's a freshman coming in that year or someone that's touring the campus. They come and watch, the men's hockey team, whatever levels, and they come and watch boys prep, and they're like, oh my God, look at these guys, the way they carry themselves, the way they're so nice, and they're willing to, show you around. I had the same experience, and I had that with Luke Greiner, Ben's older brother, and some of those guys like Derek Stepan and Davey Taves. Those guys were people that I looked up to when I came in as a freshman. So I wanted to be that type of role model as well. And he helped me kind of mold myself into that, leader that I am today.
That's great to hear. And I think, sort of as I'm getting a little bit of a theme of this, your story and is, giving back to people who sort of in moments, again, like not every moment is a very like definite moment, right? And like there's ways to find good or find silver linings along the way, right? Like you talk about, you're sort of a little bit of a jump to stardom a little bit, right? Where you didn't really have those gradual steps and being pushed into the limelight a little bit and not necessarily being able to gradually grow into yourself and who you were and probably, who you wanted to be, right? Like you sort of, because of your jump from, roller hockey to AA, all of a sudden to Shattuck, it's like you had to define yourself as a hockey player. Do you have any advice for somebody who's sort of going through something where they identify as sort of the easiest thing for them when maybe they don't? And maybe that's too complex of a question, but sort of, I guess I'm getting to the point where like you've obviously found your role, and you talk about how much RPI away from the rink shaped you into who you are, and your experiences with, your head coach as, a fatherly figure rather than, a hockey coach to you. Right. And sort of, do you have any advice for somebody who's, I guess, hoping to be a more well-rounded individual and sort of locked into this, like, nope, like I'm a sort of a hockey player, I'm a, mathematician, whatever it is, sort of anything like that?
Yeah, definitely. That kind of brings up my point, how I spoke to earlier is, getting outside your comfort zone. I know a lot of people want to stay in the bubble that they're in, but understanding the people outside of just your circle and reaching out and going to different groups. So whatever that might be, an art group or a science group, and, not just always taking classes with all your buddies, because that forces you to really have to get to know someone else and say, hey, I get to know you, Nick, on a personal level. What are you into? Yeah, you might like hockey, but you might also be really into snowboarding, and why you got into it and why you might be so great at it, and why I would love to learn that. That's kind of the things that I picked up on later in life. I picked it up probably in my junior career, but that's really where I would say, get out of your comfort zone and push yourself all the time, because it's only going to make things easier as you get older and older and you do other things in life.
Yeah, and I don't want to, I was trying to think of a word to describe it, and I don't think pigeonhole is necessarily the right term for it, but like oftentimes what we're best at, that's kind of ultimately it ends up being like our main focus, right? And we're so in tune to that. But the amount of expectation I think that comes with that, and whether it be expectations that you're putting in yourself to be successful, or whether it's just like society's perception of like that's what you are, I think it can be it's difficult. Like, say, you mentioned earlier that at some time hockey was going to end. So I think sometimes for individuals that have that kind of one-track mind, it can be devastating sometimes when it's the end of that chapter of their life, or if things aren't going their way in that aspect. So I think that's a really good point that you bring up, just in terms of kind of, finding your calling and being a more well-rounded individual overall.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah, and I think, as I continue to try to look into, your message, and I think it really can resonate, especially at this point in time and in our, current climate, nationally, as we try to interact with one another, right? Like, there are a lot of really difficult things going on and uncomfortable conversations, on a whole spectrum, I guess. But sort of the understanding that, we are all very different and we all identify a certain way, but understanding that there are a lot of people that can add to your, daily life and make things better, make things more enjoyable. You can learn on a daily basis, from LGBTQ rights to Black Lives Matter to the political, landscape at this moment, sort of hearing people out and having, conversations that can, benefit you, right? Like, it gets you on that one track mind that we've sort of been talking about, where like, this is my, thought, like, this is how I am. Like, I don't know. I'm rambling here, but I think that's a really solid message just for like our current climate in the United States right now.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's tough right now. And I think, those conversations have to come, no matter if someone doesn't like it or not. You might not like someone else's opinion. I always tell people it's good to hear someone else's voice and understand why they think that way, because there's a reason why they think that way, whether you like it or not. It's only going to help, in the discussion, when you can understand their point of view and they can understand your point of view, and you can talk about it and say, hey, this is why I think this person might be better, in politics, or this person might be better, and how this is affecting us and where we can help close the gap. Just like in hockey right now, you're seeing a lot more of the community trying and get more diverse people into the sport. It's not going to happen overnight. It never will, because if you don't know already, hockey is one of the most successful sports out there to date, and that's because of getting on the ice, but then also the equipment. And that's something that we are trying to work on as a whole, whether it's from your community all the way up. And how do you get, those lower end class or middle class people to start to open up and say, I want to put my son or daughter into the sport. And I've never played it before. That's the first step. That's where a lot of parents struggle and say, hey, well, I'm about to shelf out $1,000 before my kid even touches the ice, to be something special, even just to allow them to try it. And I think, only way we can do that is by, helping these communities, whether it's free equipment or whatever it might be, to get them out there.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you moved back to Raleigh and you've been coaching some youth hockey here. So I think sort of a good question, after that would be, how are you as a coach, trying to make room for individual identity within a team, or, what are some practices that you're trying to use in order to hopefully instill some of these, conversations at a younger level, or just try to, create a space that people are able to share and be themselves in?
Yeah, definitely. I actually got brought on as an assistant coach with a coach that actually got my career started. So I'm helping them. Didn't get to pick the team or anything of that nature, but just helping them on more on the skill level. And then I got brought on recently to help in diversity here on the board of North Carolina Hockey Association. So we have some projects that are, going to come out, and, how we can start to help grow the game and where we are missing the gap to allow more diverse people. Like I mentioned before, it's not going to happen overnight. We have to understand, how we even have like a clinic or something in the summer where we can get a community of people to come out and start to understand more about the game and learn, the background of it, and people that are invested into these youth, because that's the only way you're going to grow it outside of what the game is today in the area.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, congratulations on that appointment. That's awesome as
Thank
well.
you.
That's good to hear. And just to kind of start to wrap things up here and just bring it back a little bit. One thing that we always like to ask our guests is, if you were approaching whether it be a friend or a family member, or potentially could even be, a stranger or someone who you're not close acquaintances with. How would you talk to somebody about their mental or physical health, or how would you approach them in a situation where you could tell that somebody wasn't quite themselves?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is, you never want to do it around a bunch of people. I think a lot of people's first thought is, I see them and I just want to say it. I want to get that person, uh, just me and them, so we can really talk and we can really discuss an open subject, because a lot of people are going to feel very vulnerable, and they're not going to just come out and say things. So you're going to have to make yourself vulnerable at the same time, and maybe have to share some of your stories to hopefully open up on their side. And I've had to do that before and say, hey, this is how I can kind of relate to you, because I've dealt with this in the past. And share something that's close to your heart, because you want to protect them, but also show that, hey, I've been through this, and you're going to get through this. There's better times ahead.
That's awesome advice. And, sort of to finish up here, the last question that we have is, having gone through your experiences, sort of what does mental well-being look like to you?
Yeah, mental well-being is, it could mean a lot of things, but for me, just, staying positive and having a routine. I think where a lot of people struggle is not having a routine. Every day you can't say it's going to be perfect, but having something to get you up and get you going and motivated. My day kind of starts with a workout, and then, I'm planning my day, so forth. And I always know that I'm going to have something in the afternoon, whether it's walking my dog, hanging out with the family. I try and keep that. And, of course I, shuffle things around from time to time, but I think routine is one of the biggest things that people lack on. They kind of go by the seat of their pants, and then as soon as it goes to the left, then they start stressing, and it becomes a huge matter in their life, and things kind of start to fall apart. But if you can have a pretty regular and deep routine, then you'll be all right.
Yeah, well, more great advice. So I'm sure our listeners, sorry, will appreciate that. But yeah, I'd just like to say thanks so much for coming on and joining us, Kenny. I know that Nick and I were excited to talk to you. So it's been great to have you on, and hearing a little bit more about your story, and some advice to our listeners as well.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for the time.
Thanks, Kenny.